Good morning, everyone. So as you've been hearing all week, cyberspace is an indispensable domain of operations for carrying out NATO's 3 core tasks of collective defense, crisis management, and cooperative security. And as we have recognized, cyberspace is also contested at all times. So we're contending with state and non-state threat actors that seek to destabilize the alliance, employing malicious cyber activities and campaigns. These threats are affecting NATO as well as the civilian providers that we're partnering with. And with the complexity of cyber threats ever increasing, defending NATO's networks requires faster detection, better response, and a complete, accurate, and reliable view about the technology landscape in our own environment. So my talk is about that. It's about strengthening NATO cybersecurity by more deeply understanding our own environment, particularly when it comes to vulnerability management. So if we can focus on understanding our environment, it's not really a focus on bringing in cutting-edge technology like quantum or AI, but it's really focusing on the basics and cyber hygiene to improve resiliency. So at NATO, it's a political-military alliance. On the political side, allies are setting policy to provide political oversight, direction, and guidance on how NATO's cyber objectives are contributing to the overall defense and deterrence posture of the alliance. And on the military side, the alliance is conducting defensive activities in support of objectives in the 5 military domains: cyberspace, land, air, sea, and space, enabled by effective IT capabilities. And at the technical level, the focus is really supporting those 2 arms of NATO, protecting and defending NATO's communication and information systems, CIS, and networks to ensure mission assurance and business continuity at all times. An NCIA agency's role in NATO, where I work, is from that technical perspective. We're playing a major role by serving as NATO's principal CIS service provider, responsible for developing, operating, and defending NATO networks, planning and delivering IT and cybersecurity services for a variety of NATO and national customers, working with ACO and the NATO CIO, planning and conducting defensive cyberspace operations, which are technical measures to identify, divert, and mitigate potential adversary activity on our infrastructure, and providing continuous skills development and education, which includes training and exercises. And the CIO team and the agency where I sit orchestrates and supports the execution of these different cybersecurity activities that we do. But protecting and defending NATO's networks is no easy feat, in part because the NATO enterprise consists of numerous distinct organizations or entities, which is understandable. The networks that we have reflect NATO's evolution. But while the agency is the largest CIS security or service provider, there is no single entity that owns and manages all of our technology, which is very much like large multinational corporations. Across the enterprise, a quarter of the entities manage either the full technology stack or parts of it with their own IT teams and funding mechanisms. And that includes functions like IT asset management, which is concerned with knowing what hardware and software is out there, details about the manufacturers that we've purchased from, the warranty status, the costs that we've paid for licenses and equipment. And it includes IT configuration management, which builds on asset management to include changes to systems, the IP addresses that are assigned, versioning, information about how assets are being used. So everybody's doing their job, but the way the functions are implemented varies a lot across NATO. In the talk from Anissa yesterday, we were hearing this is a universal challenge for organizations today. The businesses don't know the assets that they have, or perhaps they don't know enough about them. So bringing coherence to the information that we have for the entire NATO enterprise can bring big rewards from a cybersecurity point of view, because we need to protect and defend NATO as a full enterprise. I think this was definitely a theme from the conference this year. We were hearing similar messages in the Palo Alto Networks presentation that we need to start talking about asset and configuration management. So I'm here just advocating the same thing. So while we have this federated technology environment at NATO, one benefit that we do have is centralized IT governance. So this is where the NATO CIO or the OCIO, in its role to ensure enterprise IT coherence and serve as the single point of authority for cybersecurity, plays a key role. So for our decentralized technology ecosystem, the OCIO is able to establish processes that go beyond the boundaries of individual organizations and then orchestrate these activities across the federation. So taking this enterprise approach to IT, asset and configuration management in particular, is going to create that clear overview of the technology landscape that we need to defend against cyber threats and build an enterprise cyber risk picture. So the rest of my presentation is really focused on a particular cybersecurity function, vulnerability management, where we see the reliance on asset and configuration management very strongly. But like lowering the silos and creating this enterprise coherence when it comes to IT management is beneficial not just for vulnerability management, but for the whole spectrum of cybersecurity functions. So cybersecurity, really, it's including, we're talking about strategy and decision support functions like risk management and identification of business critical assets. These are strategy and decision support areas, or even program management, acquisition management, budget management, workforce development, and then the technical cybersecurity functions, not just vulnerability management, but architecting and engineering solutions, baselining and ensuring compliance, and that our systems can be accredited. Security operations, where we're doing monitoring and detection, the threat assessments that we're doing, and incident response. So I think it's helpful if we look at our cybersecurity program and the functions in cybersecurity, the blue areas that are here, and see them as underpinned by the foundational IT management functions that include asset and configuration management. So that when we're considering the investment that we're making and the maturity that we have in cybersecurity, we're also factoring in investment and maturity in the IT foundation below. So if we do look at vulnerability management, it's the standard 6-phase process. First discovery, the team's asking, are we vulnerable to something? Then prioritization, what should we address first? Then evaluating, how are we going to manage these vulnerabilities? Are we going to patch, mitigate in some other way, reconfigure systems? Then we'll need to report on these vulnerabilities and what required actions need to be taken from stakeholders. We remediate, where we're fixing the problems. We heard on the first day of the conference from Microsoft this plea to please improve our patching. And then the verification phase, just to track and trace and make sure that we are no longer susceptible to particular vulnerabilities. And so as the team is executing this process, some of the questions that they need to answer are, what is the exhaustive list of technologies that are in use? Do we have a particular software installed in our networks? Do we have particular kinds of hardware devices? What is the mapping between the assets and the teams that manage those? What are the dependencies? Do we have existing baselines for these products? What is the mapping of IP addresses and domain names to the assets that we're worried about? And how up-to-date is all of this information? You can think of like a real-world example, like Log4j. It's presenting a very high level of risk for organizations worldwide, and you need to know what systems are running Log4j and need protection, and you need to be able to answer that in minutes and hours, not days or longer. So investing in the basics to be able to answer those questions quickly and then protect the NATO enterprise, it's a key element of the NATO enterprise cybersecurity strategy. Specifically, we're working towards superior visibility on assets, who owns them, their interdependencies, the business criticality to NATO, supporting vulnerability management of those assets, understanding the risk towards the organization, and applying an appropriate risk treatment. And we want to have a single source of truth for asset and information data, which is enriched with the data sets that we need in order to perform analysis, visualization, and reporting. So we're thinking about this using a three-tier concept, this high-level framework that was really put out first by NIST, and we've called Enterprise ACPV. At NATO, the ACPV is an acronym that stands for Asset Configuration and Patching to support vulnerability management. And this is the idea of bringing together the single source of truth as opposed to having fragmented views. So the three-tier model shows an enterprise or tier 1 level capability that's integrated with the asset and configuration management systems that are in the local NATO entities, and it allows cybersecurity functions to access and dynamically query that information. The solution should allow discovery, aggregation, enrichment, visualization, and analysis about data and technology across the enterprise. So then the systems and inventories that are maintained by local teams is referred to as tier 2, layer 2, that feeds this tier 1. And then tier 3 are referring to the raw data sources or the systems themselves that we need to track the assets that we're tracking. And so this tier 1 solution would be built on top of existing asset and configuration management solutions and is developed in parallel to ongoing efforts within the local entities who are consistently and regularly carrying out their own individual efforts to improve and mature the asset and configuration management functions that they're responsible for. So as I said before, we are executing asset and configuration management today, and everyone's doing their job, but the way the functions are implemented varies a lot. And another issue is that the use cases for doing asset management and configuration management aren't really sufficient. So first, there are many different systems that are being used for managing assets and configurations today. And second, information's being captured using a mix of structured and unstructured data formats, different data models. And the details that are being collected about assets and configurations aren't really the full set of information that's required for vulnerability management. And the reason for that is that asset management and configuration management have not traditionally been for the purposes of supporting cybersecurity. Asset management's traditionally been concerned with knowing what you have from a logistics point of view, a financial point of view. It's executed primarily to provide information to procure and deliver like spare parts or track license costs, report on spending. And configuration management has traditionally focused on changes to technology to ensure compliance, look at changes at a particular moment in time, support IT, ticket handling, or support service level agreements. So this focus on the basics of the IT management, it's first to bring an enterprise coherence to our data, but second, to ensure the required support for cybersecurity and for vulnerability management. So the details that are particularly helpful for aiding strategic decision-making would be, in addition to knowing the technical details of assets and their configuration, having ownership information. Who is the owner of an asset from a mission or a business point of view? Who's managing the technology? What purpose does the asset have? How is it being used? Is it business or mission critical? And some additional security information. What are the latest vulnerability scan results? What is the accreditation status for CIS? Is there relevant threat intelligence that can be associated, and so on. So we don't necessarily have to change the variety of technologies that we have in place that are managing our data today, but we do need to improve processes, expand our data models. So teams need to fully cover the areas of the technology stack that they're responsible for, make their data accessible in a consistent and automated way, using standard data formats, provide updates according to frequencies that are acceptable for cybersecurity work, and then collect the right information. So in the process of developing this ACPV Tier 1 enterprise solution with the objectives that I described, we're doing this in this complex NATO environment. We have to take into account different classification levels, out-of-band networks, a variety of NATO security controls that are in our policy and directives. And to meet those challenges and deal with this tricky problem, the NATO OCIO, together with NCI agency, we're trialing a new collaborative agile acquisition approach for the work. So we've heard over the conference for the last 2 days the need to work in an agile manner, the importance of partnerships, particularly harnessing industry and its expertise in a variety of ways, from the design of services to their operation. So that's what we're doing. We're finding new ways to leverage these partnerships in NATO. So we're partnering with industry in the design of the solution as well as the delivery phase versus putting out an invitation for bid and prematurely specifying and defining rigid requirements. So it's nice to work on this project in that collaborative way with industry. We're learning a lot, and we're hoping that this new acquisition approach will be something we can use in further projects as well. So in conclusion, at first glance, asset management, configuration management aren't the most exciting topics in the world. They may not be the first thing that comes to mind when thinking about new approaches for cybersecurity and innovation, but I think these foundational IT functions provide a critical source of information to be able to do effective cybersecurity work, particularly vulnerability management. And so it's part of the enterprise cybersecurity strategy for NATO to invest in the basics to meet these goals. We're also exploring agility through this acquisition process that I mentioned, leveraging opportunities to collaborate while balancing the need for fair and open competition. And we're going to continue to look for ways to stay agile. Another area where there might be opportunities to find efficiencies can be how we look at compliance and accreditation, which is something else we can explore. And this is just one of many initiatives that we're undertaking at NATO to meet our cyber resilience objectives. So thank you very much for your attention. If there are any questions, I can answer them.
I'm Janos, a researcher at the COD. So my question is that your organization has an opportunity to be notified the potential vulnerabilities earlier than the public. Thank you.
We have partnership agreements with various organizations to share information, and so through those relationships, we're able to stay in ahead of the threat. I hope that answers the question. Yep.
Hi, my name's Guy. Thank you for the presentation, very interesting. So maybe 2 questions. How do you collect this data? And how do you connect the business context or processes to the different assets to help with prioritization?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of there's a lot of management systems in place today which hold different pieces of the puzzle. So when we're collecting the information, we're reaching out to the variety of IT teams and working to understand what data they capture, how that fits into a broader data model. And then to bring in the business context, it's a lot of manual work and discussions, competing priorities, but needing to make a decision about an overall priority or set of business critical, mission critical assets as well. But it's an iterative process with definitely manual and automated components.
Good morning, Michael Kuiper. You talked about a single source of truth. Can you explain that a little bit more? I didn't really understand too well what you're saying about, what does that actually mean? And my other question is for companies, private companies that are interested in joining the team and providing support. You talked about some kind of new agile ways. How do we connect with your organization to join the team and help you in these endeavors?
Okay, so for the single source of truth, the idea is that there would be a place to go for cybersecurity teams, for vulnerability teams, for say the OCIO as the enterprise IT coherence leader, to be able to ask questions and get information about the state of the technology landscape rather than needing to go to a multitude of different organizations and people or systems in order to gather that information. So not necessarily one sort of mother of all databases, but at least one interface, one place to begin to ask the questions or look up information that's required. And then in terms of working with NATO, there are, through the different national missions or organizations in NATO that publish opportunities for collaborating with NATO, there are advertisements or posts about different projects that we're starting and opportunities to engage and be a part of the process. So we held 2 industry days last summer on this topic and had, I think, more than 60 industry partners listen to our explanation of the problem and the vision and where we're trying to go. We had a very receptive audience in terms of wanting to work with us in this collaborative way rather than the traditional, we send a set of requirements and then a system proposal, from industry would come back. And so we've continued to work with those different partners on this process.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Please join me in a big round of applause for the wonderful presentation.